So what I said this morning was part of the preliminary investigation, what we knew at that time. What I told you at that time, what I think is new now, is I said at that time that what we knew was that Golden and or Ford had pointed their guns at Deputy Curry. What we know now from the investigation, from video evidence, from statements, and from physical evidence, including rounds that are here, etc., is they actually fired the AR-15 and fired handguns at Deputy Curry. That's pretty significant. It's substantial, and Deputy Curry was in the car. They turned, pointed the AR-15 at him. He fired. He fired about 17 rounds, struck Golden, and then Ford fled. And I think the evidence shows that as Ford was leaving and fleeing, he was turning around firing at Deputy Curry at the same time. So that's very significant, and they knew who Deputy Curry was. And when Golden, who we determined is the person that came out and confronted Deputy Curry, he looked through the front windshield of the car. Deputy Curry's got uniform attire on saying sheriff, identified him as a law enforcement officer, and he came around to the driver's side and indicated to Deputy Curry that he knew that he was a police officer. And he then turned around, went back, got Ford, got the gun. They came to the corner of the building up here and then turned and pointed the AR at Deputy Curry and fired, again knowing he's a law enforcement officer. So that's very troubling from both of them. Golden has, and think about this, and we talk about the system and we talk about recidivism, and Golden has 36 prior felony arrests. Ford has 9 prior felony arrests. On top of that, a whole bunch of misdemeanors and a whole bunch of time in jail and prison. And so, you got a couple of bad guys that were going to kill a cop.
Can you talk about how much of a close call this was for you, Deputy?
It doesn't get much closer than this, and thank goodness that Deputy Curry is a very skilled deputy. He's well trained. He's on the SWAT team. He has prior military experience, and he did a phenomenal job at saving his life. And from what we've seen, again, from the physical evidence, from the statements, from the video, he tactically moved the way he should, and that he was moving and shooting and went to a place of cover. If Deputy Curry had not gotten out of his car, that car probably would have been a coffin for him, and he probably would have not survived, because they were firing at about 10 yards. 10 yards is not very far. At a maximum of 10 yards, they were firing AR-15 .223 rounds at Deputy Curry. And if he hadn't moved as quickly as he did and moved in a tactfully sound way, in a tactically sound way, they could have had a very different outcome. And I guess I'd say thank goodness that you had a deputy that was very skilled and knew what he was doing.
So he was a sitting duck in the car when they started shooting him?
He was sitting, he was, and you could characterize it as in that way, because he was a sitting duck, that they were going to execute him. And they're that close with an AR-15, that close with .223 rounds. We know the destruction and devastation of .223 rounds. And they fired. They had a total of 3 handguns. They had the AR-15. They had a Smith & Wesson 9mm, which is on the ground still behind me here. And then they had a .40 caliber handgun, which Ford had, that he fled with. And as he fled, and there's shell casings in the backyard here, and there's bullet holes in the fence behind me over my right shoulder that are fresh. So as Ford is leaving, the evidence shows as Ford's running, he's shooting back and still trying to shoot at Deputy Curry as he's fleeing, and then he went up on top of the roof 5 houses down.
Was the first shot, so the deputy fired the first shot?
So I can't tell you that for sure.
And was his first shot, whether it was first or second in this scenario, was he in the car or was he already out?
He was out of the car, and so as Deputy Curry gets out of the car, he immediately, as soon as he sees them turn with the AR-15 round, or AR-15, and pointed it at him, he gets out of the car, and his first shots were firing over the top of the door, so over the door jamb of the car. He's firing, and then he moves in a tactical way around the front of the car, behind the car, on the passenger side, behind the front wheel well there, and then that's where he remained in a position of cover.
Has it been determined that these guys, the 2 people, were the same ones that were starting this police chase in the beginning? Do we know that?
They were not.
They weren't the people?
They were not, no. It was, so when this started at Harn Boulevard, US 19, it was a black Lexus. The registered owner of that car is at this address. The people who we believe were in that car are not these people. And the people who were in that car, we believe, have a very lengthy criminal history as well, a history of drug dealing, drug trafficking, are well known to law enforcement in the area. But that car never appeared down here.
So really, this shooting had nothing to do in the end with this change.
Well,
it did to a degree, but not.
It was the cause of the deputies being here because, again, that car fled, committed a felony at Harnan 19, and when it fled from the Clearwater Police Department. The driver committed another felony when he fled from the Largo Police Department at Whitney in 19. And then on top of that is that the people we believed were in the car are known drug traffickers and known to be involved in other criminal activity and are related to another shooting that we were investigating up in Largo. So that's why the Violent Crime Task Force is set up down here on surveillance, thinking that those people who had committed 2 felonies who are known to be involved in drug activity and related to some other shooting that we had recently, that car was going to show up down here. So the whole purpose is to set up the surveillance and see if that car shows and then conduct an investigation. Deputy Curry had been sitting in this alley in that car that's sitting right here behind me. He'd been sitting there for about 10 minutes. And he was observant. There was a perimeter set, a wide perimeter in the area, looking for that car. So what happened up there was the cause of them being here looking for that car. And then that's when Ford and Golden came out. And Golden's the one who confronted Deputy Curry, identified him as being a police officer, and then decided to go back in and get a gun and come out and attempt to kill Deputy Curry.
Do we know which suspect had the AR-15?
Golden, Marquise Golden, the decedent, is the one who had the AR-15.
Sure. Do we know why?
No. Well, I mean, I think, Chip, the guy's got 36 prior felony arrests. Why? But beyond that, I don't know why. The one person that we can ask is deceased, and the other person that we could ask won't talk to us, and he's in custody.
This has to be 36 felonies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be upsetting to you. Someone with 36 felonies shouldn't see the light of day outside of a prison, I would imagine.
No, there comes a point in time where, we're all about, and I think everybody knows, I am, and in this county, we're all about understanding that people make mistakes. We're all about interventions and diversions and trying to help people get on the right track under the right circumstances. But there comes a line, and when people go over the line, is that they just need to get locked up. They just need to be in jail, and there's no rehabilitating them, there's no salvaging them. They're just bad people doing bad things. I think this is evidence of that. And this is one of those circumstances and one of those situations.
Sheriff, how important was the Lyft driver's videotape to help telling your story?
Important, and we were fortunate in that the rideshare driver had a dash cam, and certainly that's a piece of the evidence that is helpful to having an understanding of what happened.
As the sheriff, does it make your heart just sink when you hear the details about what happened and how close this was?
We could very easily be having a very different discussion here today. We could be talking about Deputy Curry in the past tense, and so it is very troubling. I'm glad we're not, and I'm glad he's safe and that he handled the situation as well as anybody could have handled it, and again, in a very tactically sound way. And through his training, through his experience, and through his actions, he saved his own life.
Moving forward from here, as far as the investigation going on now, what are investigators gathering? What are you looking for, and what are you trying to resolve?
Physical evidence. We have a search warrant for the house and for the apartment behind it, the car, etc. So it's a matter of collecting physical evidence. There's some video, additional video that we're in the process of trying to collect. So it's really focused at this point on crime scene analytics and collecting physical evidence.
And about the going back to the car, or the car that was driving around, I believe the Lexus. Anything? Are you still searching for those people or is that something
that's secondary? Because that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Literally every night down here, the Violent Crime Task Force, every night here and in other parts of Pinellas County, are running into situations where traffic stops are attempted and people flee. Just before this, like a half hour before this incident, the Violent Crime Task Force encountered somebody else in another traffic stop. That person had a trafficking amount of drugs, had 2 handguns and $7,000 in cash. I mean, so the fact that this is happening and all these people with guns, and we're taking guns off the street literally every night, this is not an anomaly. This is happening all the time. And one of the reasons that we've had the success, remember going back a couple years ago here in Pinellas County on an annual basis, we had about 2,800 auto thefts a year. We're now down to about 1,700 auto thefts a year. But it's because of the work of law enforcement and pushing this back in the Violent Crime Task Force that we've had the success that we've had. It doesn't solve the problem, but it suppresses the problem, and if we weren't out here with these enforcement efforts, we would have significantly more crime. And I know that because we've been through this before where we've tried to back off with enforcement, and when we back off with enforcement, we get a spike in this criminal activity. So this is where it's coming from, and these are the people who are doing it, and we've got to keep on them, and that's what we're doing.
Sure. One other question. I actually have two questions. Mr. Ford going to be charged with felony murder for the death of his accomplice?
He has been charged with felony murder, yes.
What are the other charges he faces?
Also being a felon in possession of a firearm. So those are the two charges right now. Of course, additional charges are pending the outcome of the investigation. You know, as I said earlier this morning, the investigation's in its infancy. I'd say it's still in its early stages. We've made more progress since I talked to you earlier this morning. But additional charges would be dependent upon what the physical evidence shows, additional video, additional witness statements, those kinds of things.
Any idea? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
The U.S. Attorney's Office made an indictment last week of people down here in South St. Peter. Do these people run in that same circles? Is it somehow connected to that?
I can't answer that. I have no idea about that.
Either of these men wanted for anything else prior to this? Or, I mean, it was just they were already out, they were...
No, just their extensive criminal histories, but they had no active warrants for them.
Did you say you caught the other guys in the car?
No, we did not. No. Okay. All right, guys.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate it.